All right, everybody, we're ready to cast on. So I'm going to show you how I have my yarn set up here. I have my yarn tucked inside this project bag. Let me see if I can show you that a little better. I've just put both of the cakes in there, and I folded down the top of the bag, okay, to kind of keep everything contained and straight, and that way it makes it easy for me to pick up and put away in the evening, so that I have that away from my naughty cats. I have cats that like to get a hold of yarn balls and then run through the house at night while we're sleeping. So yeah, they're a little naughty. All right, so let me gently set the tripod back down. I had to kind of move that away so it's not quite so close to you. So what I'm going to try to do is I want to cast on, and I have this yarn is coming from the right side, the right ball, and this is coming from the left side. Now this one's a little kinked up because I'm pulling from the inside of this one and the outside of this one, just because that's what my daughter said she prefers. I will also post a link down below to where I got this project bag. I've really liked it. It has a very nice zipper and it's very well made. So I'll post a link to that down below if you are curious about where I got that. Okay, I'm going to hold the two ends of my circular needle in my right hand. So I'm going to simply put the first strand between my needles, okay, like that. Now I'm going to have the tail and the top of the yarn. I want to keep them kind of in a triangle like this over my thumb and forefinger. And I do have another video that shows Judy's magic cast on, but we'll try to just go through it. I'm going to start with my top, and I'm going to bring it toward me, around underneath the bottom needle, and then through. Okay, that's one. And now I'm going to take the bottom and go around the back, over the top, and into the middle. And I'm going to continue doing that kind of figure 8 motion until I get the desired cast on stitches completed. All right, so let me count here how many I have. All right, so I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on the top and 9 on the bottom. That would be a cast on of 18 stitches. I'm going to do 12 on each top and bottom so that I have a cast on of 24, I think would be my preference. Okay, now I've done that. I have my 12 on there. Okay, now I'm going to pinch this. All right, I'm going to pinch this with my right, and I'm going to move it on down here. Okay, now hopefully this will stay pretty secure while I go about doing the same thing with my second sock toe. All right, I'm going to pull this out and kind of leave myself some little extra of that kinky business there. All right, now I'm going to lay this over the top like I did the first one. I'm going to keep some pressure here because I don't want to lose what I've just done. That would be a big bummer. And I'm going to start by getting my triangle established. This is super fiddly in the beginning. And so if you feel like you don't want to mess with all this and you want to just do one at a time, cast on one at a time, that's fine too. So I started with the top last time, so I'm going to start with the top this time. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it the same way that I did the first one. Okay, and I'm using my middle finger to guide this because I'm still hanging on to that first sequence, the first cast on that I did over there, behind there. Okay, and I do feel a little like I need to hurry on up. Thank goodness. Okay, now I have them both secure, hopefully. This is a little nerve-wracking. Now, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning here, but if I was doing this in the evening, I'd probably be having a drink by now. Okay, so you can see that I have both of these on. Now, I'm going to turn my needles. I'm not turning my work in the same way. I'm not flipping like this. I'm rotating. I'm going to rotate my needles clockwise. So I'm not turning my work in the same sense that you do when you're turning something inside out. I'm just rotating so that the needles are now pointed to my right. All right, sorry for the bumping the tripod there. Now what I want to do, I'm going to pull out a little extra here from my project bag on both sides to give myself a little slack. So you can tell I'm working with the darker one here to start with. I want to make sure that the tail, I'm going to tuck that up behind. This is my working yarn. I'm tucking the tail up behind and hanging onto it with my index finger there. Here's my working yarn. Now I'm going to take the bottom needle and go ahead and pull it through because I'm going to need that free to knit with. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull through the cable. I'm not going to pull too much though. I need to have my loop back behind. See behind my wrist back there? You need to have a decent loop. Curl this around. We're going to assume you're pretty familiar with magic looping by now. And now I'm simply going to knit across those top stitches of my darker yarn. And I have my working yarn here. Now the lighter one that's now on, you know, behind my left hand there, I'm just going to leave that there for a few minutes. I'm keeping some tension on it with my fingers back here, but I'm just going to leave that be. I'm going to go ahead and knit across this top row, snug up that first stitch, give it a gentle tug, and I'm going to knit across these first 12. Now I'm going a little slowly. I'm being careful not to split any stitches at all. I'm just being super cautious because I don't want to lose anything back here I've done. So, you know, it is a little awkward, but you can do it. Tell yourself you are the boss. Okay, done that. Good. Now, I am simply going to do the same thing. I'm going to drop this tail, and I'm going to drop this working yarn, and you're going to move across to your lighter, or your second cast on, which really was the first one that you did. Make sure that's a little bit snug. Okay, you're going to want to have the tail in front, like we talked about before, and I'm just going to tuck that up out of the way. Hang on to that with my index finger. My working yarn is underneath here. It's underneath the other one, and that's okay. I'm just going to kind of ignore this, and I'm going to pull this up so that I can use it. Now, give yourself enough slack to pull out. I'm tucking this up behind my project bag, and I'm just going to ignore that for now, and I'm going to go ahead and knit across this other section of stitches. Okay? Being careful to give the tail a little tug, snug up that first one. Okay, ignore your other sock and working yarn for a moment. Just work across these 12 stitches. Okay, now I'm just going to gently slide this down a little bit out of my way. Now at this point, because we rotated our needles, we do have our yarn, our supply yarn coming from the project bag that has crossed over one time. So when we turn our work to knit back across the other section of stitches, we're just going to be mindful not to put an extra twist in there and to turn it back the opposite way so that it untwists. Okay, so we'll get the hang of our yarn management here, but what I want you to do right now is hang on to this, adjust your cable. Okay, pull that cable. All right, now I want you to take a moment to notice which way you've crossed here. All right, and now all I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn my work carrying on clockwise so that I am uncrossing my supply yarn. Okay, it's really that easy. All right, continue to manage your cable. Go ahead and pull through the bottom one just like we did before. All right, now you have your working. Now, depending on the placement of your stitches, depending on whether when we were doing the cast on, if you started with the top and bottom yarn going over the needles and into the middle, or whether you brought it underneath the needles and into the middle, that determines the orientation of your stitches now. Whether you need to knit through the back loop or whether you have the front leg of your stitches forward or not. So knit through the back loop if you need to reorient your stitches in the proper alignment. And if it already is correct, well, that first one was right, but now you can see that the second one on mine, this stitch needs to be knitted through the back loop because the rear leg is forward when it should be the front leg is forward. So it all depends on whether you need to knit through the back loop on the second row, all depends on how you do the Judy's Magic cast on initially. Now I'm through that. See, I'm through that. So I'm going to let go of this light colored yarn, and I'm just going to slide that down my needle a little bit and kind of get it out of my way. Well, I can't go too far, I guess, can I? And then I'm going to get a hold of my other be careful to keep that tail out of the way so you don't accidentally knit something into it you don't want to. And this is the yarn I have, the darker color that I have on the my left side. And again, I'm just going to check the orientation of things, whether it's the first one is correct or not correct. And again, it just depends on how you wrap it and start. So now I'm going to do the first one as if regular knit stitch, but then these others I need to knit through the back loop. So that's easy enough to see, though, whether, you know, which leg is forward or not. This one you can tell the back leg is forward, so I need to knit it through the back loop to correct the orientation. And I tell you, if you didn't and you ended up with your second row here that had twisted stitches, I doubt anybody would really notice, truthfully. All right, so finish going across that, and then I'll show you what's next. All right, I've knitted across my cast on row, and the tail was a little bit loose, so I'm just gonna snug that up a tiny bit. And now I want to go across this row again, which is actually going to be row 1 of the pattern. And that's where I will start increasing for the toe. So I'm gonna just manage my cables in the magic loop way, just like we always do. And when you have your points turned to the left, we need to, now we need to rotate. So just make sure that your yarn, my yarn's a little bit kinky here on the left because it's coming from the inside of the cake. But what I'm going to do now is rotate clockwise again. Draw your bottom cable through. All right, now let's check our pattern. You can see that we have 2 distinct toes going here. The yarn is simply crossed. It is not twisted or tangled, it's just crossed. Okay, so that's totally fine. All right, let's check that pattern. I am on page 2 at the top left, and we've completed Judy's magic cast on, 12 stitches on each needle, and now we're setting up for the toe. Depending on what kind of needles you use, you may or may not need to do this. She's suggesting that you knit 12, place a marker for the middle of the round, and knit 12, place a marker for the other end of the round. When your tail is on the right, you know that that's the beginning of the round, because if you turn your needles, then obviously the tail portion or your beginning would be on the left, wouldn't it? Okay, so we can tell we've got our foundation started here. And now we're going to begin with the toe increases. So she says, repeat these 2 rows until you have 64 total stitches. Well, for me, I'm going to be knitting a total of probably 72. So I will be repeating these 2 rounds until I have a total of 72 stitches. But you need to do what works best for you, depending upon your swatching and the size of your feet or your intended sock recipient. All right, the first thing she wants me to do is knit through the front and back loop. So I'm go in as if to knit. I'm gonna just go ahead and knit into that like normal, but I'm not slipping it off my needle. I'm gonna take my needle around behind, and I'm going to knit into the back of that very same stitch. All right, knit through the front and back. And then I've made 2 stitches from 1. And now you're gonna knit across that until you get to 2 stitches before the end of your first toe, your first sock. This pattern is written for 1 at a time. So she's just saying, if you were doing this 1 sock at a time, you would have a marker here because that would be the middle of your round of your 1 sock. But since we're doing 2 at a time, we're just gonna knit to 2 stitches before the end of our first sock toe. Okay, so we've done that. All right, now we're gonna KFB or knit through the front and the back again of the same stitch, and then simply knit the last one. And she says slip the marker, which we would do if we were only knitting 1 at a time. But since we're not, we're gonna go ahead and let go of that one, which for me is on the left side, and I'm gonna pick up my other working yarn, which is the lighter. It is helpful to have 2 different colors, but if you don't, you can tell which is which here and keep it from twisting. Now I'm gonna kind of take this over, and then I want to bring this underneath so that I don't knit over the top of it. And just, you know, make sure that you're not twisting and crossing things. So again, I'm gonna knit through the front and the back loop on this one, as well to begin my, because I'm still on my increasing row. And I'm going to knit across these stitches here. Now, I will mention this about knitting 2 at a time. And one reason I've been somewhat reluctant in the past to do this. If you make a mistake, let's say we would have made a mistake back here on our first toe, back here, you have to take out the second one as well to get back to the first one. And so that's one reason that some people don't like knitting 2 at a time, is because if you have to tink back, you have to tink back the other one as well, because it's all on the same needle and you have to get back to where you made the mistake. So now I have 2 stitches left, and I'm again knitting through the front and back loop here, and then I'll simply knit the last one off. All right, so now we've completed half of that round on both of our toes. So I'm going to pull the bottom cable through. I'm going to pull the top one through, and being mindful of which of my supply working yarns is over which one. See, my left one's on the top, and so I'm going to continue rotating my work clockwise like that. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. So then I've just uncrossed, and that's how I'm going to manage my yarn. It's just I've uncrossed them, and so rather than making a twist. All right, keeping in mind where we are, we're still on our increasing row because we're doing 2 at a time. It will take a little longer, but that's okay. So again, we're knitting through the front and back of this first stitch, making 2 out of 1. All right, knit across until you get to the last 2 of this particular toe. So there's our increase, knit front and back. All right, now we're going to just carry on, drop the working yarn, pick up the other toe working yarn, and whoops, it is again a little awkward. Again, knit through the front and back till we get to the last 2 stitches, and we will have completed the increasing round. So we're going to do an increase round, knit a plain round, do an increase round, knit a plain round. So what I want you to get from this video, and now that we're on our way here, is we just need to be mindful of your yarn management here, and whether you're going across, or whether you're going to rotate clockwise, or whether you're going to bring it toward you. You just want to be careful that if you go clockwise and you're crossing the left one over the top, that you just reverse that motion and uncross your yarn from your supply. Some people use Ziploc bags. I'm using a project bag because I like it, and that seems to keep everything pretty tidy. And then we know I can tuck this inside here. Now, before I tuck it in, I would likely make sure it's uncrossed, and then I would tuck my work on top of the needles here, or sorry, on top of the yarn here, and then zip the whole thing closed, so that when I go back to do my work later, it's all straight and ready to go. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to continue around here doing a plain row, and I'm going to alternate the increase row and the plain row and following the pattern until I get to the desired number of foot stitches. All right, the toes are looking good. I'm still working the increases. I have a few more rounds to go until I get to what I think is going to be the final stitch count for the foot of the sock. You don't go anywhere without your knitting. I'm in the waiting room of a truck place waiting on my pickup to be worked on, and so I've gotten a good amount done just in the last hour that I've been sitting here. So yeah, always go with your knitting. All right, now I'm pretty excited. We have 2 toes. So I increased mine up to 36 stitches on each half of each sock for a total of 72 around the circumference of each toe. And so during the next episode of this series, we'll start knitting the leg pattern. All right, so be sure to like and subscribe if you're so inclined. Join the Facebook group and or the Ravelry group, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.